downward slope of the year here, at least in calendar terms, but maybe in outcome terms as well. Certainly not in guest terms there. Freedom Day arrives in July. Should we be punching the air and celebrating? Well, vaccine passports also look they're getting back on the menu. England had a great run in the Euros, but stumbled at the last hurdle against Italy on penalties. Who'd ever think it? England losing on penalties hardly ever happens. And to no one's surprise, the NHS, in its own words, can't meet the pressure it faces without additional funding. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Extraordinary. I guess the high point of the month for me was Freedom Day of sorts finally arrived. Didn't come as we were promised initially in June, or anticipated in June, 19th July. Low point, well, I was at Wembley for the Italian victory. Banter of the month, well, an old song made it back up to the heights of the charts. Three Lions, first recorded in 1996, got all the way back up to number 5 on the back of England's heroic failure in that football tournament. So to pick through what on earth happened in July and what we made of it, great pleasure to welcome back onto the show Talk Radio presenter Mike Graham. How the devil are you, sir?
Very well indeed, very well. It sounds like the sunlit uplands though, doesn't it, July?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it was at least sunlit, I guess. I wasn't so sure about the uplands part, but yeah, it was at least sunlit. And Guido Fawkes, senior reporter, Christian Calgie. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. I seem to remember the football was a lot more positive than you've made it out. You're quite the pessimist.
Well, I mean, it's always positive in contemplation. It's only in retrospect, right? I mean, everybody always thinks England are going to win. We got further than normal. So, yeah, everything's... I went to the only 2 England games that they didn't win in.
Oh, Scotland
and Italy, yeah. So, I'm the curse.
Did you pay for your
entirely
ticket
your
to the final,
fault.
or did you just jib in like everybody else did?
Well, I know, I was very lucky for the final in that I didn't pay for my ticket, but a friend of mine got pinged, something we're going to come on to, so couldn't use his ticket.
Ah, yes.
So I got a freebie seat.
I thought you were admitting to being one of the ones who jumped the barriers.
No. I was in the midst of that, but I can prove on my phone, through the NHS app and everything, all other.
I mean, the thing about the police as well, right? The Metropolitan Police. The reason why there's something going terribly wrong there is that they actually said after they issued their report this week, thank goodness England didn't win. And you go, well, hang on a minute.
Whose side are you on?
Whose side are you on? What are you, Italians now? Apparently it would have been a lot worse if England had won. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so at all. Well, the whole problem there, of course, is everybody knew there were like 12,000 empty seats in the stadium. Yeah. So if you know that, I mean, if every seat had been sold, nobody would have tried to break in.
Exactly,
but because there were 12 seats going spare.
And the fact that they didn't realise that people might gather outside the stadium before the game, or indeed in central London.
I mean, who would expect that at a major football match?
I do think even for the British public, some of the behaviour on the day of the final it was a bit extraordinary. I seem to...
But surely Mike's point is it just wasn't policed.
No, but how would the police not expect it, though? Don't you think people, oh, this will be fine, we don't need any extra police at all, we'll just let them all come to the game and go into the game, leave the game, go home, nothing bad will happen.
So they're also busy policing hate speech on Twitter.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
Yeah, you've got to get your priorities right on this in 2021, What's a massive football match? Freedom Day, let me start with that, so-called Freedom Day. This is obviously due to come, as we've already discussed, in the previous month of June. But finally, it emerges on, when was it? July the 19th? Mike, was that like VE Day for you? Suddenly, you waving the Union Jack from the
I mean, a bit like what you just said, the whole year has been a bit of a drunken blur, really, because the only thing I do remember is standing around in the street drinking pints of beer because you weren't allowed into the pub.
Yeah.
And then there was one particular pub near our office which kept reopening and being closed again by the police and then reopening. And you never knew whether it was going to be open or not. It was kind of a crapshoot, right? And we'd stand on these freezing streets drinking beer, almost, just perfunctorily because we thought we should. So once the pubs opened again properly, and then we had proper Freedom Day, and you could actually do all the things. I'm without wishing to incriminate myself, I haven't really missed out on too much over the course of these lockdowns because I don't believe in them. So,
but did you prefer your pint as an act of defiance?
I quite like that.
Yeah,
I did quite like that. And I support always anybody who doesn't have any wish to put vaccine passports and anything. I never went to any restaurants or bars that asked for that. And if they did, they weren't going to get in my business. And there were plenty of places that didn't.
Yeah.
So Freedom Day for me was a bit of a damp squib, really.
What about for you, Christian? Were you punching the air on
it's exactly the same, really, because it was sort of phased in, wasn't it? It wasn't a big from nothing to everything moment. I think my memory is just going from spending a month at the pub and having to order from menus or via apps.
Yeah.
And then on Freedom Day, the only thing that changed was you're allowed to go up and stand by the bar, which is perfectly lovely.
So basically, the quality of service declined on Freedom Day.
You had to do more yourself, I see.
You had to do stuff yourself.
And also it was a lot busier as well, wasn't it? Because I remember the first time, actually, I was in the Horseshoe, our local, and you went up to the bar. Suddenly there were people standing. It was brilliant. But it then took a lot longer to get a drink.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that, especially over here in Westminster, so much of the atmosphere is about being, crowded in, to quote various sources, cheek by jowl, and mingling like that, which you just can't get, sat down and having waiters serve you. So that's
so it was only a small additional slice of freedom served up on a plate, really, wasn't it?
So I still haven't really encountered anywhere. I don't know where you're going, but the only time I've ever been asked for a COVID passport was at the Royal Albert Hall. I've never been to a restaurant or a pub that's actually asked for it. And it's...
Did you notice, Mike, 'cause you were saying your boycott, it seemed to me a number of establishments that I came across, some were somewhat officious, you must scan in here. Others, I mean, I got into the habit, as long as you kind of waved your mobile phone and stuff, I said, is that all right? Yeah, that's fine, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them were just going through the motions, weren't they? Just in case some sort of vaccine passport Nazi turned up to say, what are you doing? They said, we're doing that, and you'd have a QR code and all that sort of stuff. But you're right, people were just waving them, and nobody was really... And I think that's what will happen if they go back to them, or if they try. I mean, it's only at big events. I went to the cricket, sort of half expecting that they might ask for something, and nobody bothered. In England, India, at Lord's, and... they just walked straight in.
Yeah, so I need you gentlemen to explain to me the Pingdemic, right? So I don't know how this is supposed to work, but the number of people, the whole cost of this track and trace app, £5 billion or so.
Yeah, how does that work out, by the way? Has anybody broken it down? I mean, they always give these figures.
£5
billion. You go,
it's quite a lot of beer, isn't it?
That's how?
And it was a shambles, wasn't it? I mean, you could get pinged because you were in a different train carriage. Yeah. We could be behind a wall, right? Somebody next door, you haven't even seen them.
We had vertical pinging in our building, where somebody came in and got pinged from somebody upstairs. And you're kind of going, well, hang on a minute, there's a floor in between. You're not even working in the same place, But I think the Pingdemic was mostly for train drivers who didn't want to work.
Right.
Who apparently would walk down the high street getting apps.
Just
trying to get pinged. Being pinged all the way down until they got pinged, and then they could take another week off.
Christian, have you been
Southwest
pinged?
trains were particularly bad.
I mean, the story of the app and its whole failure dates right back to the start of the pandemic. I remember on Guido, back during the first lockdown in April, March, the government was trying to develop this contact tracing app. And it was obvious from the start that it was going to fail because the government wanted to do it all in-house. They wanted to use their own app design and have their own security. And everyone was saying from the start, Apple and Google will not give you the APIs to allow you to get the proximity of other phones through a government-made app, because what sort of precedent would that set in more authoritarian countries? And sure enough, they made the app, it didn't work, and they had to go back to the drawing board and concede and let Apple and Google basically drive the app. So that built up costs anyway. And then, we were talking about scanning into all these restaurants, and eventually, the amount of people who realised that it was pointless, you were all getting pinged, because so much of it wasn't via proximity. In the end, what it was just, if you scanned into the same pub as someone, even if they'd left 2 hours before and they had COVID, then you were also going to get pinged. And it was so damaging for general compliance, because it was blatantly wrong and inaccurate and time wasting and interfering, that eventually, almost all of my friends deleted the app well before Freedom Day, just because they could.
You could. So I think that's right. People took it. Could we have done this any better, Mike? I mean, I get the kind of concept behind it, right? Let me try and, for once, be generous to the government and the authorities, a rarity for me indeed, but I'll show a bit of festive spirit. The idea was this. We want to start to let people go about their completely normal business, but that will mean higher transmission. And therefore, we want to kind of let you know if you've been on a flight with 50 people who've gone down with it, or you've been in a pub. I mean, I think it might have been too binary. And you're right, Chris. One person at 6 o'clock, has now gone down with it. You weren't there till 9:30. Seems, but you get the concept behind it. Could it have been done at all well, or do I have too much faith in the state?
I think the problem is it's a great example of sort of theory over practice. And somebody sat in a room somewhere in Downing Street and thought, this is a good idea. Look how we can use data and we can use modern technology to solve a problem which is actually an age-old virus which infects loads of people. I don't know whether we would have been any worse off if we hadn't done anything. Honestly, because all the people that have died have mostly been older, suffering from other conditions. You're still pretty unlikely to be dead, even if you got a bad version of COVID.
Especially if you say under 65.
If you're under 65, absolutely. So, I mean, the whole idea of trying to I mean, I read a piece in the Sunday Times a little while ago about this guy Cummings brought in. He was some kind of, data genius. Can't remember his name, but he was some guy that...
All of Tom Cummings' friends are data geniuses.
And he was full of the joys of spring, and he was all about collecting data and making sure the NHS knew how to use it, because it was very bad at collecting data, and that was how they were going to get their way out of it. We've had so many realisations of how we're going to get out of it, but we haven't got out of it. Here we are about to go back into it. And suddenly all the technology and all the money doesn't seem to have done any good at all. And if it had done any good, how come we've got so many dead people lying around,
Christian, what do you think? Do you take a more sympathetic view to what the government sort of tried to do, even if it failed? Not really, do you?
It's just the government. I don't know about other countries, but the British government just cannot do these sort of big projects accurately, within budget, on time. They never have, especially IT projects have always been a failure or have gone massively over budget. We can't even wean the NHS off pagers, let alone start revolutionising data.
They're still using fax machines.
They are. They're like the third biggest...
Everything's on paper.
Third biggest proprietor of pagers in the world now, because it's just bonkers that how old-fashioned they are. But I'm slightly worried that we seem to now be talking about going back to this point because of Omicron. We're going to have to be contact tracing. If we are really serious about living with COVID, we have to treat COVID like we do any other flu, any other cold. We don't isolate when we get the sniffles at Christmas. We don't stop kids going into school just because they get flu. Every year there's a flu season at schools. Every child gets a bad dose of it. They live to tell the tale. We've not stopped our way of life. Can you imagine if we'd had this technology in the 1900s when these things started, and trying to contact trace? It's pointless, and we're just living with it. We've got to really be bold and just go, people are going to have it. We're all, most of us are vaccinated to a large degree. We've got massive herd immunity. Let people get on with their daily lives. You cannot.
Take the precautions
you cannot just stay at home
do,
for 10 days every time you encounter someone with the virus.
I've said throughout this long broadcast, I'm not a scientist, so I'm a very simple person indeed when it comes to science, and indeed many other things. But Mike, couldn't we just use tracing a lot more? So when I was abroad and feeling a bit under the weather, and I was tested myself, these kits out where I was in Mallorca are extremely cheap. It's a couple of euros a time. I just tested myself every 3 hours, and then I knew when I was through it. I didn't really need to, and I took sensible precautions at the time.
But were you testing positive, you mean?
Yeah, okay. I was testing positive. And but I just wonder whether we should have just made it much easier for people to test themselves all the time. I'm not going to ping you because you were in the Horseshoe pub 4 hours after somebody got it. I'm not going to put any mandate on that.
If you don't feel well, test yourself. But if you feel fine, I don't think there's any reason to do it. And I don't understand why so many school kids are still being tested. My own son's school has apparently said to him, we might have to shut because so many people have got COVID.
Was it with kids because they don't show any symptoms at all?
Yeah, but it's because they're not sick.
Yeah.
They haven't got any symptoms. They're not ill. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Just carry on. But they want to, shut everything down just in case you spread it to members of your family. Well, that's the family's problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just think there's this overbearing kind of belief that they can stop the spread of it, which they clearly can't, and they clearly have no clue about. And I would suggest that they take a view that if you're not well, you should stay home, and that's it, really. And you don't have to test everybody else who feels fine.
Christian, you were saying that kind of as normality approaches, let's hope to God that 2022 is a kind of normal year. Fingers crossed. That's my Christmas wish anyway. But do you think Do you think the problem here is the other way around, that on the one hand, freedom-loving people could sort of say, look, this is now like the common cold or flu, it doesn't justify any restrictions, but those on the other side of the ledger might say, actually, you're right, we should bring in compulsory face masks every winter because it's the cold season or the flu season. And if we did this to tackle variant X, let's bring it in, let's test kids at school every day for everything. Haven't we opened the gateway to that? Because the restrictions, which, I would say at the very least have been highly disproportionate, but if they happen and have happened, why not apply them to other things as well?
No, I mean, you're totally right. The problem is that the pandemic has shifted so many people's mindsets, but also the establishment's mindset, which is that these sort of public health crises always have to be dealt with by cutting off freedoms. And in a way, the government needs to take a lead on it. We've got a few, I do emphasise, a few decent right-wing libertarians in government, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who will fight the cause of freedom, but they've got to be on the airwaves going, look, you need to come out of your homes now. Pandemic's over. You need to stop wrapping yourself in bubble wrap and cotton wool.
Well, then they get accused of being reckless and causing people's deaths because of the numbers of people on the other side who talk absolute rubbish, by the way, but who keep saying it.
Well, the problem is that as a humanity, we've lost our reasoning with the whole concept of death, and it sounds really bleak and sort of sociopathic. But the reality is that for hundreds of thousands of years, people have died. And now we have a live bloody ticker that comes through on your phone every day telling you how many people have died from this one disease, which as a media, as a society, we are still putting above cancer and, bloody deaths with people with Alzheimer's and all sorts of other issues. And that, as a society, which are far higher, and unless the media is either stopped from pushing these constant drip, 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 fear these figures, and either have to contextualise them or stop publishing them, then we're not going to be able to move on. And that's the media's role.
But you two gentlemen are both in the media, but Mike, let me ask you about this. I mean, TalkRadio and probably Guido Fawkes are honourable exceptions here. But generally speaking, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a politician, and the barrage of questions you get from most mainstream outlets are always, why aren't you doing more? Here is a problem, why haven't you solved it? Are you at least going to make some effort to solve it? Yeah. Do you think that means that even freedom, loving politicians, or at least politicians who in a neutral environment would lean towards freedom, are just sort of think, well, kind of the easiest thing to do is, something must be done, this is something, let's do this?
Yeah, well, I think that's what happened, last weekend, wasn't it, when Sajid Javid did what Grant Shapps said they wouldn't do, which was reintroduce pre-departure tests. They said, we can't do that because it will wreck the travel industry. Presumably now they don't care if they wreck the travel industry. Well,
they keep putting in, is this, do you blame the government or the media, or is this some unholy
both,
alliance?
I think. I mean, because we got a rather ridiculous situation that I worked out the other day. If you wanted to go to Lapland with your kids for the day to go and see Santa, you've actually got to take the pre-departure test that you would take in Lapland in England, because there isn't enough time for you to do it over there, because you're coming back the same day. So you've got to take your pre-departure test from England, then you've got to take your pre-departure test from Lapland in the same place.
In the same place, yeah.
And you've got to produce both of them, and you go, well, that's mad, isn't it? It's completely bonkers, right? But the Mail Online just the other day had a story about how a new study has come out in which it says that masks are now 200 times more effective against you getting COVID. And then it says about 6 paragraphs down, but it's not a proper real-time study, so actually nobody's taking it seriously. And you go, well, why are you writing it then? What's wrong with you? And it's Omicron, the latest kind of narrative is Omicron, or whatever it's called. What's it called?
Omicron.
And Whitcomb. And Whitcomb correctly
yeah.
pronounced it in the proper Latin, which I think is Omicron. Omicron, yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, whatever it is. They keep saying, it multiplies, it's 3 times more transmissible, it's doubling every 3 days. But nobody's in hospital. Mm-hmm. But they don't say it's doubling every 3 days, but nobody's in hospital. They say it's doubling every 3 days. It really goes, oh my God, better cancel the Christmas party then. My accountant just rang me and said, we normally meet up for me to give him loads of money to send to the tax man. He said, I suppose we shouldn't meet up.
I bet you're happy with that then, if that's the purpose of the meeting.
No, because he's emailing me it. So I said, well, why not? He said, well, we probably shouldn't meet. Why?
Yeah. Christian, how do we put this right? I think you were saying slightly tongue-in-cheek that, you've got to stop the media asking these questions. I mean, we all believe in a free press, right, which I guess involves allowing people to ask stupid questions and write stupid things. My disapproval of them. But I don't quite know what's gone wrong here. Let me give you an example. We could surely compare and contrast the difference in restrictions in England, Scotland and Wales. And on the face of it, I mean, you might need to delve into the data deeper. The stronger restrictions in Scotland have had no positive effect.
Quite the reverse effect.
But you can't, I haven't, I've had to delve into that myself. It's not been a front page
No one's
story.
made that argument.
So there's always the ramping up of restrictions, no retrospective analysis of did that work, Nicola Sturgeon. Why?
Well, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon's got away with a huge amount this pandemic. But you're right, all the nappy wetters in England saying, we need face masks, we need COVID passports. Well, they were in Scotland, they were in Wales, and they were in Northern Ireland. And actually, I think other than Northern Ireland, both Wales and Scotland for the last couple of months have had much higher COVID rates than England. So clearly there is not a correlation or causation there. But the reality, we talk about a free press. The press is driven by writing the things that make money, right? So they don't really have a view on a lot of these things, or actually you'll sort of see contradictions. You'll see the Mail ideologically talking about getting rid of COVID restrictions, but then reporting all this fear-mongering, headline-grabbing stuff. And the reason they do that is because it gets a lot of views and it makes them money. So the only way we can get over this is by the public getting worn out. And that is, well, firstly, it's going to take a while anyway. Things like this Downing Street Christmas party that many people feel is just utterly hypocritical and absurd and rage-inducing, that massively hits public attitudes. There's a poll out saying almost 1 in 3 people, because of the COVID, because of the number 10 Christmas party, are less likely to obey future lockdown laws.
Once you see other folks not
exactly.
abiding by
So
it,
those sort of things over time will eventually lead to the press getting bored and moving on. But it's a bit of a cyclical, self-fulfilling prophecy.
But Mike, do you have that problem? I mean, you could argue that you, rather than blaming the politicians or blaming the public, I guess you could blame the readers and listeners. Is there a case that kind of, scarce stories, clickbait, whatever, that's what...
Well, I always say people like bad news. They don't really like good news. They say they do. I mean, if you have a focus group for a newspaper, they say, we'd like to see more good news. You go, well, what is that exactly? They don't know. They don't know what it is. They only know what bad news is. It's usually quite boring. It's always boring. That's why it's not news.
I mean, you don't appear on TalkRadio and say, nothing much has happened today, here's Bill with
I did once do a show where I came on and said, I'm just going to do everything positive today. People loved it, actually.
Right.
But I mean, it was a one-off.
You couldn't get away with that 360 days a year.
You really couldn't. And so I think the other thing is that the government's obsessed with polling, right? And all these YouGov polls that come out that say, 75% of people want more lockdowns. You go, what?
Yeah.
Why? And nobody really believes the polls, but the government leads their policies on the polls, and they go, this is what we've got to do, because that's what the people want. And they always hide behind that. And the people don't really want that, but they don't want to say. If somebody asks you in the street, do you want to have more restrictions in order to stop people from dying? You're not going to go no, are you? You're going to go, all right then.
You're going to say, are you happy not seeing your family this Christmas? Order, as a result of those restrictions, you'll get a very different answer, and the pollsters ask questions.
There's no. I've banged on forever about the difference between revealed preferences and stated preferences.
Exactly.
There's no actual price to an opinion poll. It's the same when you ask people, do you want your taxes to go up to pay for more public spending? The consequence there and then of saying yes is naught.
Yes.
The consequence of it happening is quite high on your back pocket. So, gentlemen, I guess July was only sort of freedom month in a way, a bit kind of, not as upbeat as we could have been. I'm asking all of the guests on this marathon show to give me their overall audit out of 10 for the year. Christian, let me start with you. This is... how do you take 2021 as a whole? So take yourself out of July, put the whole picture together. Naught is, the worst it could possibly have been. 10, nothing could possibly have been better or improved. What's your overall retrospective audit of 2021?
I'd have to go very low. Probably about a 3. I think if the years were wine, this has not been a good vintage.
Not a good vintage.
Barely
even a table wine. A bit like the IEA's wine then.
No, the IEA's wine is far superior to 2021. I just think the thing I remember about this year is I don't really remember anything good or interesting happening. And I specify interesting because at least 2020 you had let's be honest, the excitement of a new pandemic. And it was a bit,
Come on, England nearly won the
Interesting.
Euros. What more
It was
do
a
you
bit
want?
like living through an apocalypse film, that March, April time last year. And this year it was just a bit old, same old, same old. And then we got the plan in January, and you're like, well, great, we know the season finale now. It's all been spelled out for us.
Yeah. Mike, what about you?
Well, it depends on which perspective you're talking about, really. Because from my perspective, it was a great year. I had a fantastic time. You know, nothing better than having an incredible rolling news story to do.
Yep.
I mean, I went in today, I was like, what a time to be alive.
Yep.
Boris is on the rack, you know, Keir Starmer, might actually land a punch, you know, Legostrand, surely he's out of a job by the end of the day. I mean, Boris might be gone by the end of the year. That's in the news business, that's what you want. You know.
So Mike, you've had this, I guess for journalists, stuff happening is interesting.
Yeah.
But what's your figure out of 10 for it overall? I mean,
10?
And I guess 10. Couldn't have been better.
Listen, apart from not seeing my mother at Christmas, which is taking maybe a bit of a shine off it,
right.
That's been amazing.
Right.
Incredible.
So you're not looking forward to a return to normal in 2022?
Oh, I will, because there's always something. There's always another story.
We can be sure that
we can just go back to chasing them for corruption and all the other rubbish they get up to.
Yeah, I guess that's right. So chaos will continue to reign in the new year.
I don't think the Conservative government is anywhere near sorting anything out. I mean, there's always the migrants to go back on. And once the weather gets a bit better, there'll be another 1,000 a day arrive, and they're bringing bigger boats apparently next year.
Right.
So
So you're not going to be short of content.
We really are.
You're not going to.
No.
So anyway, in the festive spirit, share a cracker with me.
I'm sure you've rigged that.
Yeah,
I normally win these.
I've done it's years of practice, my friend. Years of practice. We've got the IEA. These are IEA economics Christmas jokes. See if you can get that. Oh, they're absolutely appalling. I don't know who came up with these, but I'm getting them off the payroll. What did the man say about the economy when all of his goods became worthless?
One for you.
Years since I did economics.
What did the man say about the economy when all of his goods became worthless?
Nothing.
I don't depreciate this at all. Absolutely
So it's just
terrible.
ruined Christmas.
One for the accountants.
Yeah, one for the accountants. One for the accountants. Well, Mike, Christian, thanks for your analysis of July, your take on the year. Lovely to see you. Have a very Merry Christmas. Great to have you with us. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.